Okay, so for this show, we need to determine each product using the rectangle model method. The first one, 1 3/4 times 1 3/4. Well, in this case, we can actually draw more of a square because both numbers, so both side lengths are the same. And I'm going to first separate them into two pieces using one horizontal line and one vertical line. And now I'm going to label them. So I've got a 1 and a 3/4 here across the top, and then a 1 and 3/4 down the side as well. So I'm going to color these 4 rectangles, I think, with different colors to help you keep track of the math that you're doing on them. And this might be a strategy that's useful for you to do as well. And let's go with orange. So I have 4 different colored rectangles now. A yellow, a green, a purple, and I don't know if you can see that, but it's orange in the bottom right corner. So I need to calculate the area for each one of these. And if I look at the yellow, it has one side that's of length 1, and the other side is of also length 1. So it's going to be 1 times 1. And I'm just going to highlight that to match the yellow. So 1 times 1 we know is 1. Now for the green, this is of length 1 and this is of length 3/4. So my area is going to be 1 times 3/4. And I'm going to make that green. 1 times 3/4 is just 3/4. And for purple, it's 1 across and 3/4 high, so it is also going to be 1 times 3/4. And so that's my purple one. And so its answer is also going to be 3/4. And then lastly, for the orange one, it's 3/4 wide and 3/4 high. So 3/4 times 3/4, which 3 times 3 is 9, 4 times 4 is 16. So that's going to be the orange one now. And as I said, using color might help. That way you know you've got each of the 4 rectangles figured out. I've calculated the area for each of them. Now the next step is to add these numbers together. So just work over here. I need 1, and I'm going to add it to 3/4, and I'm going to add that to 3/4, and then I'm going to add 9/16 to it. So for me, you could add your whole numbers together and all that and do it in pieces that way. But I'm just going to turn these all into fractions with a common denominator and then just add them up and then simplify from there. So 1, I'm actually going to rewrite that. The number 1 is a whole number, but it is the same as 1 over 1. Now I've got 3 different denominators here, 1, 4, and 16. A common denominator for all of these could be the number 16. So that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to convert them so that they're all over 16. The number 1 becomes 16 over 16. To go from 4 to 16, I have to multiply the bottom by 4. So I'm going to multiply the top by 4 as well. So 3 times 4 becomes 12. And then that's the same fraction, 12 over 16 again. And then this last one is already there. So it's 9 over 16. So now this might require a calculator to add up all your numerators, which is fine. 16 plus 12 is 28. 28 plus 12 is 40. And 40 plus 9 becomes 49. And that's still over top of 16. Now, if you were to use your calculator and take 49 and divide it by 16, it would end up to be 3 point something. So that means my whole number, if I'm converting this to a mixed number, is going to be 3. So 16 goes into 49 3 times. And when you do that, 3 times 16 is 48. So you're going to have 1 remainder. So that's going to be 1/16. So your answer is 3 and 1/16. So the answer to 1 3/4 times 1 3/4 is in fact 3 and 1/16. That's the process that I would follow every time you do one of these. And I will do the same thing for part B. I will use the colors as well, because I think that does help make sure that what you're doing makes sense. Now notice, this is very organized. I start with my model, and I label it, and then I move over and I calculate the areas in one clean line. It's not all over the page, they're all organized one after another. Then I drew a vertical line to separate that workspace from my next workspace, and then I worked through and I added my fractions together to get my final answer. So it's very cleanly organized. I recommend you follow that same process when you do this work. If you're organized, you'll be able to figure out where you're coming from and where you're going, and you'll know if you get distracted, you'll be able to go back to it and figure out where you left off. So, part B, we'll do another one here. Start with a rectangle, draw in my dotted lines, and then label 2 and 1/4. Well, this part becomes my whole number, which is 2. This part is my 1/4. And then my next one is 1 and 1/4. So the 1 is for here, and 1/4 is for there. And again, I'm going to have some color coding. So the area for the yellow is going to be 1 high by 2 across. So it's 1 times 2, which is 2. That's my yellow. Next up, we can do purple. And the purple is 2 across by 1/4 high, so it's 2 times 1/4, which becomes 2/4. And I don't know if I need to reduce it yet. I could reduce that down to 1/2, but I'm not going to stress over it right now. I'll deal with that when I'm adding my fractions together. It may be useful later to have it as fourths. It may not be. I don't know at this point. So then this rectangle, oops, I didn't color that one, did I? Color that one purple. So the next one, the green one, is 1 high by 1/4 wide, so 1 times 1/4. That's for the green one. So again, that's there. And 1 times 1/4 is just 1/4. And then lastly, we'll do the orange one, which in this case is 1/4 by 1/4, which is 1/16, but that's my orange. So now I need to add these up. So 2 plus 2 over 4 plus 1 over 4 plus 1 over 16. So that's what we need to calculate in order to get the answer to our multiplication question. So again, it looks like 1/16 is my common denominator. So 2 can be written as 2 over 1. If I'm going to go to 16, then I multiply top and bottom by 16. So that means it's going to be 32 over 16. Multiply this top and bottom by 4, becomes 8 over 16. Top and bottom again multiply by 4, so it becomes 4 over 16. And then this one's already 16 in the bottom, so it's good to go. So everything has a common denominator. Now I can add them up. 32 plus 8 is 40. 40 plus 4 is 44. And then 44 plus 1 becomes 45. And that's 45 over 16. As a mixed number, 16 goes into 45 twice. That gives you 32. And that leaves you with 13 remaining. 45 minus 32 is 13. So you have 13 remaining. And that can't be reduced at this point. So that is your answer. 2 and 13/16 is your answer for this particular question. All right, one last example. 1 and 1/4 times 1 and 1/3. Again, start with your rectangle, draw in your dotted lines, 1 1/4 times 1 1/3. I've got yellow, which is just 1 times 1, which is pretty easy. That's just 1. Let's mix it up a little. Change the colors a little bit. So this now, orange one, is 1 times 1/4, which is just 1/4. So that color is now represented. We'll go green down here this time. And that's going to be 1 by 1/3, which is 1/3. And then lastly, this little bottom one, which is 1/4 by 1/3. And 1 times 1 is 1, 4 times 3 gives you 12 this time. And that's your purple. Hopefully you can still read that. So I've done my area calculations for each of the individual rectangles. I need to add them up. So 1 plus 1/4 plus 1/3 plus 1/12. So that's what we're working with now. I can convert this 1 to be a 1/1. That's the same thing. I'm looking at my denominators, and in this case 12 is a common multiple for each of them. So I'm going to use that as my common denominator. So multiply top and bottom by 12, I get 12 over 12. 4 times 3 will give me 12, so multiply the bottom by 3, multiply the top by 3, it becomes 3/12. This one I need to multiply top and bottom by 4. And then that one again stays the same. So now I've got common denominators, I can add them up. 12 plus 3 is 15, plus 4 becomes 19, plus 1 more becomes 20. So I've got 20 over 12. Well, 12 goes into 20 once, with 8 remainder. So 1 8/12. That's the right answer, but it's not the best answer. We can put the 8 over 12 into lowest terms. Both of those can be divided by 4. So that means it becomes 1, and 8 divided by 4 is 2. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So your answer is 1 2/3. That is an organized way to do this. And being organized is important. You've got lots of pieces in play for this. So that's your show you know.